Everybody, it's Gary Dennis, and I'm going to recap the Richland 2 School Board meeting for January 24th, 2023. And we're going to skip down through there, and we're going to go all the way past the executive session items, all the way past the, I want to say it was capital improvements. And we are going to start at the unfinished business that they talked about. So, item BEDB had another change to there. So if one of the members is out, such as the board chair, vice chair, or secretary, they will use another member to rotate in so that they can put together the agenda for the meeting. Okay, they have taken out the superintendent in cooperation with the board chairman will prepare the agenda for all meetings. They've changed it to the board agenda is set by the board chair, vice chair, and or secretary in collaboration with the superintendent. All board members will provide items to be prioritized by the board chair, vice chair, and or secretary in collaboration with the superintendent within 4 business days. So anything that needs to be put on there, you get 4 business days. If it can't go on there, then they will let that person know why. So that was voted 6 yes, 1 no. I think that's a good policy to have. The rotating member, I'm indifferent on that. I don't think you have to have it. I don't think it's a bad thing to, and I don't think it's a bad thing not to. It does give that extra set of eyes to ensure that you don't mess up on the agenda. These are very competent people, including the superintendent, and sometimes they miss things, okay? But as we were looking at that, we go all the way down to the next thing, policy BEDN, which is the portable devices. And they had a recommendation to change the, it said to include cell phones and iPads. They had a recommendation to change iPads to tablets. That way, in the future, if they decide to swap from iPads and go to a Samsung or whatever other tablet device, they can, and board policy is not stated iPads. So that's a good thing there. Now, going on to that, they also voted 7 yes, 0 no to purchase cell phones for the board. And that's so that they can talk, use emails, and have text. Now, here's the thing, and here's the reason why. In the IG report, they talked about not having those items. So during the IG report, they had to get their personal information or personal cell phones to get text and all that off of them. This right here is meant so that these are district government issued devices. So there is no having to get a court order to get it. It is there. Okay, that means they can get it and they can look at anything to make sure everything is above par. Okay, so that's a good thing there. I really, really think that's a good thing. And I can't talk about that anymore because, I mean, to me, that's a common sense thing in the federal government. You use government-issued devices. You don't use your personal cell phone device, such as what I'm using to make this video to do official work. So, you know, and then after that, they moved down to the HR staffing update. Now, the HR staffing update, we're not going to go over these slides. What we're going to do is we're going to hit on some of the things they talked about. So, they did talk about the premier males of color. They've had 21 hires, 34 hires, 36 hires. That's a total of 91 hires. But they've only retained 77 of them. So when we look at it, was it cost effective? I mean, it might have been, it might not have been. I haven't seen the numbers. I don't know the retained numbers. So that's one of those things. We have a lot of vacancies, and the vacancies is something that that needs to be looked at in depth. And the one thing that they talked about these vacancies are they're focusing on hiring bus drivers, elementary, middle school level education, math, special education, science, and substitutes, because these are areas they're really short in. Real quick plug on substitutes. If you know somebody or you can be a substitute, please substitute. I'm signed up to be a substitute. I haven't done it this year because I've had some other things going on with work, but I do plan on getting in there at least quite a few times. And the cool thing is, you don't have to sub at every school. I try to primarily sub at my kids' schools because I'm involved in those schools. I'm there. I can help them out. I can do things. And if I have to clock out and work a little bit extra to help my kids' schools, so be it. Okay? Because as parents and members of the community, it's our duty to help our young generation. Or at least that's the way I see it. Okay? So, they talked about retention highlights. They talked about mentoring first-year teachers. They talked about professional development, national board. That's a certification you can get, and you can get paid more. It's a good certification. My mother got that. My brother's wife got that. And I wholeheartedly believe in it. They also did bonuses for teachers and other people in the district. They've done term life insurance, and then they got voluntary benefits also that people can sign up for, such as extra cancer insurance, accident insurance, pet insurance. Accident insurance is really nice, so if they get hurt, they can also get extra things. And it's not just hurt at school. Your yearly exam, blood work, and all that, you can get a check for that. So, if you do that, it literally covers those dues for a year. So that's a good thing. One of the things they did talk about, though, they was talking about rookie teacher of the block and things like that, and recognizing people. And I wholeheartedly believe and that's a good thing, okay? Mrs. Washington added this whole thing to the agenda, and she's also talking about recognizing employees district-wide. I think that's a great idea. That's all your support employees. Anybody that works in the school system to support, to get their faces out in the public and let them know, hey, this is what they're doing. This is the great things that's happening here. Not just for teachers, but for everybody, because this is a whole community concept. Education is. So I'm going to say Ms. Washington had great questions, to the point, to ensure that employees, had support and help when needed. And then the speaker on that, the lady presenting that, did a great job talking about the items to the board members. So kudos for that. Now, Ms. Porter had a great question, and I think that question deserves to be looked at. Talked about retired employees, and then they went down, talking about the state and how, if you retire, there's certain things you can't do. But it ended up being a conversation in how can we incentivize people not to retire and teach a few more years to help right now. And I think that's a good thing. I think there's a way. You can't tell somebody, oh, well, you're eligible for retirement, you can't retire. But if you gave them an extra bonus or something to retain for an extra year or two with the shortage we're in and let us catch up, then that's a good thing. And that's a way looking forward. So kudos, Ms. Porter, and then everybody else jumping on that and talking about it. So great job there. Mrs. Nash also had some questions about how can we keep people jumping from Richland 2 to these other districts. Well, I can't give you a good answer other than we got to find better incentives that some of these other districts are doing, because what we put out there they see and they can find a way to combat that. And being a business person and things like that, the way I look at it is communication, as in what's the best way to keep your employees in your business. What's the best way to negotiate a contract? It all comes down to that. Now, they did talk about, where was it? Oh, Mrs. Scott was asking why we're not trying to capture people looking at other districts also, and that went in with Mrs. Nash. So I'm glad they did that. Now, Mr. Trapp, he hit on the long-term subs, and we need more subs. So once again, that's a plug. We need more subs. Now, there was a talk about the letter intent, because what happens in the early winter part before winter break, they send out letters of intent, and that's so that they can gauge how many teachers or support staff is coming back for next year. Now, I've heard a lot of people don't like that because they're not sure what they're going to do, but it does give them a gauge to figure out what they got to look forward to for the next year, such as planning budget and seeing how much they got to recruit. But, you know, it's not binding, and I don't think it should be binding. However, when they do get those contracts back out in April, May for the following school year, those do become binding. And I think that's very fair because, I mean, the school year technically ends in June, and, you know, you go through a few days, you only get 30 days off in basically the month of July, and then right at the beginning of August, you're back in it as a teacher or support staff, and then kids are coming back in August, and it just rolls on through. So there's not a lot of time to figure out if people are going to come back. I mean, if you look at it in a business world, most people in a year-round job, the same thing happens. Now, people say, well, teachers aren't year-round. No, they're not. They are paid year-round, but the way it all works out, there's just a small gap in there. So we got to keep that in mind for future retention. Now, they did talk about policy DBJ, budget transfers. You know, budget transfers to me is something that is really scary because they did bring up a good point. The board needs to look at these budget transfers to make sure that a large sum of money is not getting transferred to cover something that probably shouldn't be, or maybe we should look at a different way of funding it, or might need to raise funds or something like that. And I think it's a great accountability for the taxpayers looking at that. However, the way this policy is wrote, to me, was poorly wrote. You know, the new board needs to ensure the accountability of the money. And I think it needs to be done more often than quarterly reports. And I think it needs to be looked at a lot more. And the reason why I say that, because if something really needs to be funded, it's a big ticket item and it meets a threshold, the board needs to approve it. But I don't think they should be waiting to another regular schedule. I think they should say, hey, we have something, let's skip it and let's have an emergency session, because this is something that affects kids' education, that affects the teachers, and move forward there. So that's kind of a good thing there. Now, they also talked about policy BEDGA. Now, this policy, this policy was to help board members get information so that they can do their job quicker than them having to FOIA information from the school district. I know it's crazy. You would think a board member wouldn't have to FOIA, but that's not how it was under the last board. And they kind of put this in there to stop people from getting stuff or make it longer. But, you know, they talked about there should be a time frame of business days, and I think they come up with 10 days. I mean, they still got to iron some stuff out. And if they can't get it, you know, they need to be told why they can't get that information. Now, some people say, well, it's a privacy issue. I think it was Ms. Porter that asked that question, but we did get clarification that if it does have personal information, that information would be just like a FOIA request. It would be redacted. So you could get the information, but it wouldn't have that personnel information in there. So that's a good thing, and that allows every board member to ask stuff so they can look in and say, hey, do we need to change a policy here? Work with the superintendent, work with administration to change some policies to help them out. Because ultimately, if some of these board members are looking at these policies that are helping administration and they find something that administration's missed, this is a way to do it. These board members have to request this information, request gets to the board member, and then the board member actually has to do the work. They don't have a staff to do the work for them. They just have the administration that has to get them the information. So that's a cool thing there. And then, when it comes down to it, they start talking about the next agenda items for the 14 February 2023 meeting, and they asked about transportation, about late buses. Mrs. Washington said that a lot of parents have said, hey, my kid's failing a class because they're getting to school late, and I imagine that's probably more middle school or high school kids. And why is this happening? And parents aren't being notified that there's late school buses and things like that. I hear that, parents. I do hear that. But there are things that we don't know a lot of times. I mean, we are in Columbia, and let's face it, we got some good drivers and we got some bad drivers. So sometimes when you think it should be smooth sailing, it's not. But we do have to find a way to let parents and riders know, because having young kids standing outside is not a great thing, especially in cold or inclement weather. And somebody snatching a kid up, I couldn't live with myself knowing that. So I'm glad that they're going to take a look at this and try to figure something out. I don't know what can be figured out, but hey, it's a new set of eyes looking at it. I've never looked at it, and I've never really give that much thought into it, because we transport our kids to and from school without the public bus transportation part of public schools. So I'm glad somebody's looking at that. So, Mrs. Washington, thank you for that. And then they also wanted an update on district office staff employment help. So they're wanting to see how the administration at the district office, what they need help with, what policy, what jobs there need more people in it. What jobs might not need people in it? Where can we move people? I mean, that's where it comes down to it. We could be heavy in a department that might not need 4 to 5 people. It might can only be done with 2. Don't ever think there should be 1. There should always be 2. Somebody's going to be sick. Somebody's going to be on vacation. Somebody's got to take a sick day or something like that. So you need to have that backup. But there's some places, it was just like in the United States Air Force. Sometimes we had too many people for a certain job, and you're like, why? And then you got the job or the office across the hall, and they don't have anybody, and everybody's hurting because that office isn't getting it done. But you got all these people over here, but the way the budget's set and the way line items are set to pay people and certain position numbers, yet they can't do that job because they're not trained, they're not in that slot, they're not allowed to have that. So that's a good thing they're looking at this. And then they had the board superintendent comments, and I'm not going to get into any of that. But what I am going to say to finish this up is I want to thank each and every one of these board members. I want to thank the acting superintendent. I want to thank the under superintendent. I forgot that position, but the person under the superintendent, the deputy superintendent. Thank her also. There's a lot of people out there, the chief financial officer right now. There's a lot of good things going on. There's a lot of people. There's a different energy than what I've seen in the past 2 to 3 years on that board. It was a totally different energy between the administration and the board, and between the board members. I wholeheartedly believe these board members do not see eye to eye on everything. You can hear it in some of the questions, you can hear it in some of the rebuttals, because you can see how they're talking about it. But you can tell they're willing to work together to figure this out, because ultimately they're really wanting to do what's best for the district. And what is best for the district boils down to 2 things. What's best for the kids? What's best for the employees? That's the 2 main things. And then it goes to the taxpayers. And I know, being the type of person I am, I believe in taxpayers, but I'm a sucker for kids, and you can't do that if you don't have employees. Okay, so then everything fails if you don't have 1 and 2, and then you focus on the money. So you got to keep people happy. Servant leadership is the best way to do that, and I wholeheartedly believe the mentality is going to change. They are looking at doing this for everybody. Okay, this is going to be a big change in this school board. There's some people out there that are still talking in the news media and posting stuff that they're taking everything away from the superintendent. No, that's not what they're doing. They're changing these policies so that they can get in the weeds and they can help. Okay? That's what they're elected to do. Superintendent's still going to run stuff, but things are going to have to come through this board. The superintendent should never be making calls on millions of dollars. That is a board policy. If you don't believe me, you need to look up our state constitution and look up all the laws and see what boards are supposed to do. There's different boards and commissions across local governments, state governments, and there's certain things they got to do and not to do. And I wholeheartedly think this board's going back towards that. Lastly, the next board meeting is 14 February, so I should have something a day or two after that, and then we'll go from there. So, you know, one thing everybody can do is, instead of fighting amongst yourselves and saying things about the new board, forget it. The elections happen. It's over with. We have a new board. Work with them. Come in 2 years. If you don't like it, then focus on a new election. But right now, we got to do what's best for the students and employees and the taxpayers. So we got to get those done first. And then during the election year, you can do whatever you want to. But right now, if you're not willing to work together, then you're a speed bump in the road over bettering our community. And I'm a big believer in community. A lot of people might not be that big, but I believe in it. You know, I believe in the community wholeheartedly. Richland, too, is a community. We might be part of Richland County, but Richland, too, is a community. That's where our kids go to school. That's where our kids play sports. That's where our kids go shopping. They see each other out everywhere, whether it's up in Blythewood or down on Two Notch or down on Decker. Over in Forest Acres, over in that area, we're going to see each other somewhere, and we need to be civil and work together to create a better community, and that's what I'm here hopefully doing, and then we can go from there. But if you guys have anything, you know, always comment on the videos below, share the video, and we can go from there. As I do on my real estate videos, deuces, love you, mean it. Keep on rocking, because I love rock music, and I love that energy of being a rock star, putting it out there, and